Welcome back to our second session on building relationships. The police recently stated publicly that due to budget cuts, the police helicopter was being grounded. Instead, they had invested in training a fleet of bald eagles to carry police dogs that can be quickly dispatched to crime scenes. The statement attracted a number of complaints concerning the abuse of animal welfare and so on, the disgusting waste of public money and sheer disbelief. Now, if I was to tell you that this statement was published on the 1st of April, does it not shed a different light on things? The extra information is essential to understand and appreciate the full story. It's what we call background information or context. If we don't know the context behind the story, then we can never appreciate or understand the full meaning of the story and the intention of the storyteller. So as we think about being proactive in building relationships with unreached people so that we might be able to share the good news with them, we need to become increasingly aware of the contrast between our story and their story. Often that can be vastly different to our own, especially if we have grown up through the church and they have not. The listener's context should shape the starting point of our conversation if we want to be fully understood. In this session, we'll reflect on what the different starting points might be for people in Ireland, and we'll unpack a few steps for how we can join our unreached friends on their journey towards a relationship to Jesus. As we reflect on Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well, we can see from the dialogue how Jesus fully understood the context and it shaped the nature of the conversation that they had. This is a conversation between two people from very different worlds, a Samaritan woman of questionable moral background and a Jewish male, a rabbi figure. As the worlds of Christians and non-Christians edge further and further apart, this is a sort of increasingly shaky foundation on which many of our faith-sharing conversations will take place. So let's see how Jesus navigates this in John chapter 4, verses 1 to 26. In the story, we see that Jesus starts a conversation with one question, but thereafter it's sustained by the questions of the woman. These are stimulated by surprise and curiosity, provoked by the statements of Jesus that deepen the conversation. Let's have a conversation now about some of these aspects of the story, and then we'll come back and think about it again. Jesus is artful in the way that he negotiates and steers a conversation taking risks as he crosses all sorts of boundaries to share the message of hope that he is the Messiah. His conversation with the woman is a journey winding backwards and forth. This is what it often feels like in the journey with others towards faith in Jesus. In light of the approach of Jesus, this session is going to think about the context or starting point of the unreached people you know. We'll also unpack how you might intentionally join people on their journey to faith.
So the question we're asking now is, well, what generation are we reaching? One way of understanding the starting points for a variety of people is to think generationally. This isn't on the basis of age, but on the distance of their relationship to the church and the Christian faith. So for example, a 40-year-old could fit into any of the following generation groups, depending on a number of factors, such as Christian background, urban, rural, or social class. It can be helpful to be aware of this when we're thinking about the individuals we hope to reach with the good news of Jesus. So imagine a scenario where adults and children both go to church. So nearly everyone has a good background knowledge about the Christian faith. This is Generation 1. But when Generation 1 children grow up, perhaps they stop going to church, though they still send their own children. So everyone still has some knowledge of the basics of the faith. This is Generation 2. But when Generation 2 grow up, they neither go to church themselves nor send their children. So the adults still have some limited remembrance of the faith, but their children have none. This is Generation 3. And then whenever Generation 3 grow up, virtually no one goes to church. No one knows anything about the basics of the Christian faith. This is Generation 4. Typically across Ireland, most of the unreached people in our lives fall into Generations 2 or 3. They still have some degree of knowledge of the Christian faith, although for Generation 3, this is more akin to a folk memory. Stories that you kind of know from growing up. Added into this are two other important societal challenges. The first is Sunday trading. Sunday is now just a day like any other, and nearly a third of people work on Sundays. This has an obvious impact on people going and attending church. The second thing is distrust. Most people born after 1980 see the world very differently. The gospel truth cannot be packaged so neatly, and people are generally much more suspicious of any brand of organised religion that promises truth. So perhaps what we need to appreciate is that the starting point for many unreached people in regard to their knowledge of the Christian faith is much further back than it was a generation ago. In light of this, might our evangelistic approach need to be different? Perhaps the journey for someone coming to faith in Jesus is now much longer. It could be 3 to 5 years. Why don't we just stop, pause, and have a conversation about this? One way of considering the journey of someone coming to faith is in a series of steps. The next section will outline very practically what our relationship might look like at each of these steps.
Relationships are key. We need to be thoughtful in showing and in sharing God's love. And this takes time. Some people come to faith very quickly, but generally It's over a long journey of years. We need to listen first, not launching into telling people about our faith. We need to have starting points with people. Relationships with those on the fringe of the church and those outside of the church have very different starting points, and we need to consider that, as we've said. We need to ask good questions that help to take the relationship deeper. We need to pray for those in our lives who we're on that journey of faith with. Investing in the building of relationships will develop trust, which is the first step. And there's also the aspect of rebuilding trust. Trusting a Christian is the seed that initiates the journey of faith. And today people are more suspicious of Christianity and of religion. Distrust is the norm. And so we need to work hard on the steps to build relationship, as we've talked about. And then there's provoking curiosity. This is where people move from being indifferent to being curious. People can trust us on a high degree, but not become curious about our faith. We can get stuck waiting for curiosity to develop. Instead, we can ask good questions to provoke intrigue in the way that Jesus did with the woman at the well. Helpful questions for this step might be, what do you think about that? Or, so tell me your story. People often respond well to sharing their own stories. Do you have a faith background might be another question. What does it mean for you today? When was the last time you thought about who Jesus is? All leading questions. And thirdly, consider change. This is where people move from closed to open. Often we can mistake curiosity in someone as readiness to accept Jesus, but their questions are often academic and not personal to them. The turning point for people is when they begin thinking big questions about themselves and how it relates to them personally. This is an openness to change, not necessarily to Jesus yet, but to some growth for their life. Helpful questions for this step might be, sounds like you're hurting a lot right now. How are you dealing with that? Or another one might be, have you ever thought about asking for God's help in your situation? You see, there's a fear that we can be perceived as pushy or judgmental as we speak into their life at this stage. But we need to have confidence in our relationship built over years and be friends who speak the truth in love. And then there's the actively seeking stage. There are a number of common myths about this stage. People become seekers all on their own. False. The reality is that people need to help, need a lot of help to move to this step. People seek for a long period of time. False. Research suggests that it's 3 months at most. It's exhausting to seek, and people don't like to stay in that place for a long time. It's therefore important not to miss that moment. People know what they are seeking. False. Many people don't know what they're seeking, and we have the joy of helping to clarify that quest for them by asking specific questions and leading them towards Jesus. So how can we join people as they seek? Well, we can pray with them. We can ask God to show up in their lives. We can discuss some of the big questions they might have. We might read the Bible together with them, looking at the Gospels. We might ask questions like, is this really true? And if that was really true, what difference would it make to your life this week? What one thing can you try to put into action? Helping people to find Jesus and following him is a huge joy and privilege. And then what about people who are new followers? Well, new followers of Jesus must understand the difference that makes to their life. We can hand control of our lives over to Jesus, and that's costly to do that, and it's joyful to do it. But they also need to know that God wants the best for them. And ways we can help new believers may be to help them to celebrate, to encourage them to share what has happened to them with a few others, and to encourage them along the way. We can welcome them into the community in the first weeks or months of their new Christian life. We can embrace them into a Christian community and find a way for them to read the Bible and pray with others. Home groups are ideal. Journeying with our friends to the point where they make a commitment to follow Jesus is incredibly joyful and rewarding, but it isn't always straightforward. We need to be aware that there will be disappointments and hiccups along the road as people move backwards and forwards at times. But like good friends, we just need to hang in there, trusting that God is in control and that He will ultimately bring about His sovereign will. So let's have a chat about that now.
Hopefully, we have a better understanding of the journey people need to go on towards faith in Jesus. And hopefully, you've thought of some practical ways that we can help our friends in doing this. So, in this session, we have thought about the context for engaging in mission and how people are often much further back from a relationship with Jesus, which means the starting point is different. The journey of someone coming to faith is a series of steps, and we've been given some practical guidance for what our relationship might look like at each different stage. So let's think about for next time. Choose one of these things that you can do this coming week to help someone towards the next step of their journey. First of all, why don't you ask someone this coming week, do you have a faith background? Or think of a similar question to provoke a conversation. Just go for it. It might sound scary, but a simple question is a great opportunity. Or why not offer to pray for someone you know who is hurting right now? Or just choose something else that you can think of.